Miami is still undefeated. They haven't lost yet. And these past 2 weeks have been incredibly controversial when it comes to how Miami has won. They got a really controversial call against Virginia Tech where it looked like one of the dudes caught the game-winning touchdown, but instead it got ruled an incompletion because one of the defenders for Miami touched the football when he was out of bounds, and when that happens, it automatically gets deemed the incompletion. And then you had a controversial no call against Cal when you were down 35-10 at one point. You come all the way back, you take the lead in the fourth quarter. Cal gets one more possession with the football, and then their quarterback gets absolutely destroyed in what looked like an obvious targeting penalty that ended up resulting in a no call. And you got to wonder, are the refs helping Miami this year? Like, does Vegas want the U to be back? You got to ask these questions because some of these calls, you can make some legitimate arguments and say that these refs are favoring Miami in some of these games, because the thing about Miami is that you know that despite how talented Cam Ward is and how much talent they have on this team, you know that most of the times they're not going to annihilate teams completely. They're not going to play up to that level of talent because of Mario Cristobal being their head coach. And we've seen 2 straight weeks now where Miami has played down the competition. You were a 10-point favorite going into this Cal game. You didn't cover. And you were nearly a 3-touchdown favorite when you were playing against Virginia Tech, and that game ended up being a dogfight. And both of these games, the common theme has been that the refs have kind of helped them out. And for Miami, you know, I'm not going to say that the refs are the main reason why the Hurricanes are winning some of these games, because when you have a 35-10 lead, there's nobody who you can blame for losing that game outside of yourself. When you're up that big of a lead, you have to be able to seal the deal. If not, it's not because the refs helped out Miami. It's because you got too conservative, and that's what happened to Cal. Now, against Virginia Tech, I really don't know what to say about that play, because I understand the arguments on both sides. It's like it was initially ruled a touchdown, and normally when you rule something a touchdown on the field, it's hard to overturn it. But no matter what the rule book is, you know, that play is just one of those calls that it's so many interpretations that you can make about it that it's really hard to judge if it was the right or the wrong call. But Miami has somewhat gotten some help from the refs, but it's not the main reason why they're winning. You know why Miami is winning is because you got a superstar at quarterback in Cam Ward, and you got a resilient team that isn't going to quit no matter how big of a lead Miami may have or how big of a deficit Miami may have to come back from behind. This is a team that is going to fight to the final whistle blows, and that's something that is a big catalyst for why Miami is still undefeated right now. You know, when they get up big on teams, they still keep the pedal to the metal, and when they're down big, you know, they still have the feeling that they can come back and win the game as long as Cam Ward is still standing upright and he's healthy. With Cam Ward, he has brought in the swagger, a different energy to Miami that this program hasn't had since the early 2000s. You know, with Cam Ward, you feel Miami has a shot to win any game they play as long as he's able to stay healthy. And even if Cam Ward has a bad half of football, a bad 3 quarters, in the fourth quarter, he just seems to play his best football. He's unfazed. He always has a lot of confidence, no matter if he has 2 or 3 interceptions. He just has a dog mentality. He just has a certain swagger about him that makes Miami a hard team to beat. And even if they didn't have the refs on their side, I still believe Miami would still be an undefeated team because the opponents that they're playing aren't that good. Virginia Tech right now, like, they're a sub-500 team. They've disappointed up to this point this season. When you look at Cal, they beat Florida State, which is probably their best win of the season, and it wasn't really a convincing victory. You know, some of these teams, if Miami was playing a Clemson or something like that, if they were down 35-10 against Clemson, they probably get destroyed. They probably wouldn't come back in a game like that if they were down that big of a margin. But when you're going up against teams like Virginia Tech, Cal, these programs aren't accustomed to being in these kinds of situations where you got one of the best teams in college football on the ropes and you just got to deliver one final left hook to finish them off. Virginia Tech and Cal, it's not that they got screwed against the refs and that's why they lost Miami. It's that they don't know how to close out elite teams. You know, when they get a team like Miami on the ropes and they got a chance of pulling off a massive upset, you know what they do? They say instead of trying to get aggressive and trying to win this game, let's try not to lose this game by giving up this big lead. And they get into this conservative mindset, and that's how Miami gets back into it. Because one thing that allows teams to get back into it that are heavy favorites when they're going up against an underdog is that the team that's the underdog that's up, you know, they feel like they got a lot to lose at that point. We got a top 5 team in college football on the ropes. Let's try to hold on to this thing. But when you got a school like Miami that's trying to maintain their ranking, they're trying to keep their storybook season going, and they're down so many possessions, they're playing with the mentality that we ain't got nothing to lose. We're finna take as many risks as possible. We're finna be super aggressive until we find a way to get back into this thing. And that's why schools like Cal and Virginia Tech have not been able to beat the Canes this year. Because Miami, when their back is against the wall, they get into an attack mentality where we got to be aggressive. We got to be able to come out and have a different level of intensity that we didn't have in the first half. Now that we're trailing, we have to do more in order to win. And the schools that they're going up against, they have a completely different mentality. When you go against a desperate team that's down, they got nothing to lose. Meanwhile, when you're up so much, you feel like you got everything to lose. It's like that old model that goes, desperate men do desperate things. The most dangerous person in the world is somebody who's desperate, somebody who feels like they don't have anything to lose. And the same thing goes when it comes to college football. When you got a team that's down by so many possessions and they're in risk of having their first loss of the season, they get in that desperation mindset where we just got to do whatever it takes to win. We got to do whatever it takes to make a play to get this game back in our favor on our side, momentum-wise. But schools like Cal, they don't have that same level of desperation. Instead, they become lackadaisical, conservative because they don't want to blow the opportunity. Why Vanderbilt was able to beat Alabama is because they were aggressive. They were willing to take risks. They were willing to roll the dice even though they had the lead, because they knew that Alabama was going to have that same level of aggressiveness, so they would be dumb not to have that same level of aggressiveness on their side. That's what it takes to beat a great team. When you have a team like Miami on the ropes, you can't get conservative. You got to take extra risk. You maybe have to send extra pressure. You got to do things that you aren't accustomed to doing that make you uncomfortable, because that's what it takes to beat an elite team in college football. You got to do things that make you uncomfortable. You got to do things that are a little bit outside the norm. And that's what Cal and Virginia Tech were unable to do, and that's why they lost to Miami. It's not that the refs are saving Miami in these games. It's just that these teams don't have the ability to close out great teams, and that's why they are where they are. Cal isn't going anywhere this year, but maybe a 7-win season, and Virginia Tech, they're going to be a massive disappointment considering all the hype that they had coming into this season. They probably are going to go 6-6. Meanwhile, you got a team like Vanderbilt that looks like they could be an 8, maybe 9-win team this year, because they have a different mentality when they got a certain team on the ropes that's way better than them, that's ranked higher than them. They have this mentality that we're going to match their aggressiveness. We're going to take just as many risks as what they're going to take, because we're not trying to lose this game. We're trying to win this game, and we're going to outright prove that we are the better team. And Cal, Virginia Tech, they never really looked like the better team than what Miami was. It's just that they got fortunate that Miami wasn't playing their best football. They were able to take advantage of it. Vandy outcoached, outplayed, out everything out of Alabama. Cal didn't really outplay Miami. Miami was able to cakewalk through the first 3 quarters, and then once they got down by so much, that's when they flipped that switch and they said, okay, we need to wake up. Now we need to start playing ball. It's like if you ever played Madden with one of your homies and you're down 17-0, you end up, kind of scooting up a little bit. You get closer to the TV, and now you start locking in. That's what Miami did against Cal and Virginia Tech. When they got down, they started locking in, and those teams, they started getting conservative. And Miami really put themselves in the hole in those games. It's not like Cal and Virginia Tech were just better than them. Miami was beating themselves with the Cam Ward interceptions, the mistakes, just the self-imposed errors is what got Miami in those situations to begin with, where they had to come from behind. And you can say that the refs probably saved them against VT and Cal, but like my old high school coach used to tell me, if you don't want the refs to dictate the outcome of these games, don't allow yourself to be in a position where the refs have the final say in determining if you win or lose the game with certain calls. Some of y'all ain't going to like that, but that's just reality of football. If you don't want the zebras to dictate how the game goes, don't allow the game to be able to be dictated by them, because you put yourself in a position to win just for outright playing some great football. When you allow the refs to dictate some of these outcomes in these close games, you end up ultimately feeling like you got screwed. If you don't want these situations to happen, then just blow our team out. Cal was up 35-10. What was the reason for why they weren't able to win that game 52-10? It wasn't the refs. It's not like the refs were calling all kinds of penalties that helped Miami just get back into the lead. Like, I feel like people love saying that football is rigged as a coping mechanism because they can't accept what the outcome was, when football is not rigged. Some of y'all, I think, just are a little bit slow when it comes to this, but Vegas makes money regardless of who wins and who loses. Vegas never really loses. There may be weeks when people are betting heavy on a certain team, and Vegas may take a big hit from that, but there are plenty other ways that Vegas gets that money back. Vegas doesn't lose all their earnings off one game. I think the stupidest shit that people say is football is rigged. You can't rig a football game. You can't stage a football game. Football is real. This isn't WWE, people, where they're scripting out, okay, in the third quarter with 3 seconds left, you got to fumble the football. Like, you can't script out a football game. And nobody is going to take a ransom to flat out throw a football game. And even if one dude on the team is trying to throw a game, it's going to be blatantly obvious, and the coach is going to do something about it. Like, people are getting paid $2-4 million a year to coach this game of football. People's jobs, livelihoods are on the line with this sport. Nobody's about to allow Vegas to jeopardize their living all over a couple of million to rig a game. Like, that's some of the most retarded logic that I hear out of fans when they can't accept the outcome of a game. These are refs. These are humans. They're going to make mistakes. The only way you're going to fix the bad officiating is if you replace them with AI machines. When you have humans that are making decisions that comes down to personal perception, and a lot of these rules, a lot of these calls don't have a definitive answer. It's like the Dez Bryant catch with the Cowboys and the Packers in the playoffs a few years ago. Nobody knows what a catch is ever since that play, because a lot of these calls are judgment calls. And a lot of the things that don't get called, the refs don't see it because the speed of the game is so fast. And it has nothing to do with refs being part-time, they're not being full-time. People believe if we had full-time officials, we would have less bad calls, when that couldn't be further from the truth. The point is that the officiating is always going to be terrible because we're humans, we can't see everything, and we're going to make some mistakes when it comes to certain judgment calls, especially when you get ridiculous plays like what you got in the end of VT versus Miami. We never seen something like that before.